Welcome to the Envirothon Muskrat and Beaver video. Do beavers or muskrats use their tail to swim? What kind of trees do they prefer? Take it away, Ranger Mullen.
Beavers can be found all over Pennsylvania. Like the otter, there was a time when they were nearly gone from Pennsylvania's waters, but they are now in very good numbers and have been for some time. Beavers can be recognized by their flat tail, flat on the horizontal plane, even though you're seeing it on the vertical. The tail here has been turned to the side, which they can do. But the tail was flat on the horizontal plane. If you're at the Envirothon, you might see a full mount like this, and the tail will be your giveaway. That's your diagnostic. However, you might only see the pelt, and the pelt, the tail is not there because the tail cannot be tanned. Tanning is a process that takes a raw skin and it turns it into a leather, which locks the fur in and it keeps it from decaying and getting really stinky. Well, the tail is very thick and it can't be tanned, and so it'll be removed. It's not here. But the beaver is the only animal skinned in the round like this. The other pelts that you saw and future pelts that we'll be looking at are skinned encased, which means that the hide was removed from the animal with a sharp knife and it was just peeled down the body, kind of like you take your sock off. And so you have an entire encased fur. This one is split down the belly and opened up and stretched into a round or into a circle because this animal was once used extensively for clothing. The early times in our country, the westward exploration was done by beaver trappers, looking for untrapped colonies of beavers. If you were a successful beaver trapper, you were probably pretty well off. The fur is very nice, and it's distinct in that you can see the guard hairs, which are these long hairs, and you can see the underfur. Now, every animal has guard hairs and underfur, but it's difficult to distinguish where one stops and the other continues. For beaver, it is diagnostic. If you stroke the guard hair in the opposite direction of growth, you can very clearly see the underfur and notice a difference in color, and it looks like it's a little wavy. It's also very easily seen on the flanks of the fur. And it is that underfur that helps keep this animal warm. And for me, if I do this and I notice that underfur, again, you can see right where it stops and where the guard hair continues. I look at that and I know beaver. You can see it real easy right here. This is the underfur that I was speaking of. But even in the center, if you brush the guard hair in the opposite direction, you can see that underfur very, very well. And that's not something that's easily distinguished on any other animal. You'll notice that there are two big color variations here. There can be color variations in beaver fur. I've seen them very dark. I've seen them with a dark portion through the center and lighter on the sides. This particular beaver here is so light because, again, of the sunlight exposure that it gets here on display at the park. This is very typical of the coloration of beaver. They also produce a heavy oil. What's really interesting is that on the back foot, and I don't know if our mold will show that, it does. The one toenail on the back foot is actually split. And they use that toenail to get oil from that gland at the base of the tail, and they comb their fur with it. And that's what, again, helps keep them dry, helps keep them warm. These animals are superb swimmers, including underwater. On one breath, they're capable of swimming 10 to 15 minutes underwater. We can't do that, not without lots of practice. This fellow, because of his aquatic habits and that ability to stay underwater for such a long time, typically doesn't have to worry about predators once it reaches adult size. Beavers can get large. This beaver is small. I would estimate the weight of this beaver live to be 10 to 15 pounds. A fully adult beaver can reach weights of 70 pounds or more. And a beaver of that size by a beaver trapper would be referred to as a blanket beaver, because the fur, once removed and stretched out and dried, would probably be about the size of this table, and it would be referred to as a blanket beaver. Beaver have very large front teeth, which looks like they're in severe need of brushing. That's the natural color. Oftentimes it'll be a dirty brown to almost orange color. That's the natural color of the front teeth. And that can be diagnostic. You see two large front teeth like this, and they're that off color. They're not nice and white like our teeth. We could be looking at a beaver. The back teeth are completely flat because this animal's an herbivore. And those flat teeth are great for grinding up plant material. Not good at all for chewing up meat. So these animals only eat plants, and they eat plants of all kinds. Of course, their favorite is trees. They will take trees of all kinds. For some reason, their favorite is aspen. And after aspen, there could be willow, apple, oak. I've never chewed on an aspen tree, so I'm not quite sure why that's their favorite. But I have used aspen branches as live bait when trying to trap nuisance beaver out of an area. And as you can see, when they chew on a tree, they don't chew through it, they chew around it. And they keep making the trunk more and more and more narrow to the point where the tree will twist and fall. Some people believe that beavers can assess a tree and say, I want it to fall that way. They can't do that. They chew, the tree falls, sometimes on the beaver. Other myths surrounding the beaver involves the tail. People believe that they use the tail to pack mud into their dams and their lodges. They don't do that. Some folks believe that they use the tails to help them swim. Really, it's only used perhaps as a rudder. It is used to signal other beavers that there could be danger. When a beaver is threatened, it dives. And when it dives, it slaps its tail on the surface of the water, and that's a signal to other beavers that something could be wrong and to be careful. The back foot of the beaver, as you can see from this mold, is webbed. So they paddle with their back feet much like a duck would do. The front foot looks very much like a hand. You can very easily see the fingers that would produce similar to our hand. And with that front feet, they are capable of doing fine manipulation of sticks and stones and mud to make the dams and lodges that they rely on. The castor of a beaver is oftentimes found in one pile. It's going to be very wet because these animals are in the water a lot or at water's edge. They will travel over land, but that's not their first choice. They also will use their castor, which is the oily substance that their glands produces, to mark their territory. And you will find a mound of mud with castor all over the top of it. And that castor is that individual animal's scent. Other beavers smelling that will know if that animal belongs to that colony or not. A pair of beavers that are mated will usually give birth to kits in around April, typically 4. A mature colony of beavers can be the breeding pair, the first generation, the second generation, and when the newborns come in, that older generation moves out. They go find their own watersheds to start their dams and colonies. Beavers were extremely valuable for trappers at one time. They can still be trapped in Pennsylvania today, but the fur market is not what it once was. You do not get the value out of a beaver's fur that you once did. And that's true for most animals that can be trapped lawfully in Pennsylvania. When you're in beaver country, frequently you will also see muskrats. Muskrats frequently will be in the very same stream as beavers. They might even be sharing a beaver's lodge. These are, again, an aquatic mammal. They are an herbivore. So they're going to have similar qualities about their teeth that beavers have. As you can see, a much smaller skull, but with that stained enamel on the front, as in the beavers. The teeth are also flat, but everything is in miniature and compared to the beaver. This animal does not get nearly as large. It has a very long tail that is not completely flat, but flattened on the vertical plane. And the reason for that is the back feet of the muskrat are not webbed. So they do not use their feet to swim. They use their tail. They move it back and forth in an action called sculling, sort of like an alligator. They scull their tail back and forth, and that's what gives them forward momentum in the water. They eat all kinds of plants, and they're almost, how do I say, the anti-beaver. Beavers will dam up a stream or a water flow to create an impoundment. Muskrats frequently will hole a dike or a dam and drain a pond. Muskrats are not like that all by farmers who have ponds or by golf courses with many ponds. So they kind of work opposite of the beaver, which I find interesting. I'm not sure why that is. Again, this guy is kind of on the light side. Here we have a pelt, and you can see that it is much darker. And the pelt itself, when trying to identify muskrat, to me, again, is diagnostic. If you use your imagination a little bit, I see a triangle. Tip of the nose widening out to the base, a triangular shaped fur that feels as amazing as this fur feels, for me, screams muskrat. And I would hope that helps you in your identifying portions of your Envirothon test. Muskrat are not in the same family as beavers, though they do share the same habitat. So now for comparison purposes, I'm going to bring some of the beaver items back on the table so that you can see the difference in the overall size and the tail here particularly. Now you can see the differences clearly between muskrat and beaver. The biggest difference is overall size. Very small in the skull, in the feet, and in the body of the animal. The big difference on the tail, even though in this mount the tail is on the vertical plane, which beavers can do, in a natural pose with the tail extended out behind the animal, it is flat on the horizontal plane, whereas the muskrat's tail is flattened on the vertical plane. And again, that's for propulsion purposes through the water. It gives them their forward momentum. A large back webbed foot versus smaller and not webbed, which again is showing that it's the tail that helps that muskrat go through the water. Good swimmer, doesn't go underwater for the lengths of time that our beaver does, eats all kinds of plants, life in and around the water like our beaver does, but there are big differences that should make identification pretty easy.